Well, hello everybody. Welcome back into the Colored Gemstone Academy. I am your instructor, Paul Deasy, and this is my YouTube channel, Paul Deasy Gemstones. Well, once again, I want to thank every single one of you who have subscribed to this channel. We are over 2,400 subscribers now, and I want to know that I appreciate each and every one of you who have subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, or maybe you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a penny. It's completely free, but it does allow me to keep doing these lessons for you for free. All right, so this is episode 72. You know, I can't believe I haven't done this lesson yet. This lesson is about Tanzanite. And as you look at the iconic image of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania in East Central Africa, you're going to see this is going to be a little bit of a different type of a video. In addition to all the usual information I give you about the gemstones, I'm going to show you some images of the people, the wildlife, the mines, just some of the flavor of Tanzania from my trip when I went and visited the mines in 2001. So let's get started, shall we? And as we start, I'm going to start the same way it did all those years ago when I was on QVC in April of 2001. This was sort of the show open.
Only in a land where you'll find man's first footprints. Nature's still at work, and people whose traditions are as true today as they were thousands of years ago. Will you find a stone as rare and beautiful as Tanzanite? Welcome to Tanzanite Jewelry.
Well, no doubt most of you have probably heard of Tanzanite today, but it's a relatively recent discovery in the gem world. It was first discovered in 1962, thereabouts. Now, I say it's discovered, but truly it was the first time it was really identified was in 1962. Of course, it had been there before, but nobody really knew what it was. So 1962, relatively recent discovery. You're saying, wait a minute, that's like 60 years ago. Well, yeah, but that's a blink of an eye when we're talking about gemstones that can be billions of years old. But the story goes that there were some German gem speculators that were traveling to Tanzania in search for a new source for sapphires. Well, they happened upon a Maasai tribesman, and he said that he knew where he could take them to a place where he had seen some beautiful blue gemstones. Well, that beautiful blue gemstone did not happen to be a sapphire. It turned out to be something called zoisite, as it was called. Now, actually, zoisite became known as Tanzanite because in 1969, that's when Tiffany and Company got wind of this discovery of this blue gemstone out of Africa. And so they decided to give it a name. They wanted to market it, and they decided to call it Tanzanite. As you know, sometimes gems are named after the place in which they are discovered. So Tanzania is where, not only where it was discovered, but it's still the only place on Earth that this stone has ever been mined. Okay, so when Tiffany started to market this gemstone called Tanzanite, they were marketing it as the poor man's sapphire. Because at that time it was obviously new and a little bit less known, so the prices weren't as high as they are today. So they called it the poor man's sapphire. Well, as you know today, it is still one of the most popular gemstones, usually in the top 3 or 4 sold every single year, and that'll be important later in this lesson. But today you can't call it a poor man's anything, because you see that some of the top grades of Tanzanite today will have prices rivaling some of the finest sapphires in the world. So no poor man's sapphire.
Sometimes the lion try to attack the cows, but you have to use spear for killing them, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you had to? Okay, so let's talk about some of those vital statistics that make a Tanzanite and not a sapphire. So I'm going to give you some of the, the hardness, toughness, and chemical compositions, and I will briefly compare it to that of a sapphire so you know that they are really, truly different gemstones. Okay, so first of all, the chemical composition of that Tanzanite is a calcium aluminum hydrosilicate. Now, how does that compare to the sapphire? The sapphire is an aluminum oxide. So the sapphire being an aluminum oxide, you can tell right away some of the similarities would be that they both have aluminum somewhere in their chemical composition. Now, when we get into the crystal structure, that's going to kind of further distance them from one another. So the crystal structure of the Tanzanite is orthorhombic. When you take a look at the sapphire, the crystal structure is trigonal. So that is one big identifier that you'll know you're looking at a Tanzanite and not a sapphire. Then we get to that Mohs scale of hardness. For those of you that are new to the classes, remember Mohs was a guy named Frederick Mohs, and he developed a scratch test on gemstones, which literally meant what gem will scratch another gem. And this also shows a big difference between the Tanzanite and the sapphire, where the sapphire has a 9 out of a possible 10 on the Mohs scale of hardness. It's very, very hard. You're about a 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale of hardness for that Tanzanite. So not going to be quite as tenacious as a sapphire would be. And furthermore, when you get into something called the toughness of a gem. Now, we talked about the scratch test with the Mohs scale of hardness. The toughness talks about the tenacity and the ability to withstand cracking and chipping. Once again, we go to the Tanzanite, they would call that fair to poor on its toughness. And then you get into the sapphire, it's rated excellent. The only thing tougher than a sapphire would be jade. So again, you're going to see you have to be a little bit perhaps gentler wearing your Tanzanite than you would the sapphire. Now we get into the refractive index, and not a huge difference in this particular case. Now remember, the refractive index is a measurement. You can actually measure the sparkle of a stone. We think about sparkle, we think about diamonds, we think about cubic zirconia. They have the diamonds, I think, 2.42 on the refractive index. In the case of our Tanzanite, 1.69 to 1.7. So obviously not going to be, it can be a very sparkly stone, but not the sparkle that you would find in a diamond. Getting into the sapphire, pretty similar, 1.76, 1.77, just slightly more sparkly than your Tanzanite. That's why a lot of people might misidentify Tanzanite as a sapphire. And finally, that specific gravity. That's where we get into the heft of the stone. How does it feel compared to the size of the stone? Well, when we talk about the specific gravity, 3.35, pretty good. When you talk about a sapphire, it's a 4 on that specific gravity or the heft. Now, what does that mean? That means that if they were the same size, the sapphire is going to feel heavier and it would actually weigh more. So you would have to actually get a bigger sapphire to match the size of a similar Tanzanite. So that's the part that people get confused about, that specific gravity, because the higher the number, then the smaller the stone will be. Where you have a low number like amber, amber can be very, very big, and you might need a 10 karat amber to be equivalent to a Tanzanite of 1 carat, that kind of thing. So anyway, I wanted you to know what all of those vital statistics are that make that Tanzanite a Tanzanite. But now let's get into the more interesting parts of the lesson. Okay, so there's a lot to tell about this much sought after gemstone from East Central Africa in a place called Tanzania. It is filled with so much beauty, so much history, so much romance, but it's also filled with a lot of misinformation. In fact, in my 30 years of being in this business, in the gemstone business and traveling all over the world, working for shopping channels, I've probably heard more misinformation given on this gemstone than perhaps any other in my entire 30-year career. And there's a reason for that. I think that sometimes some of my colleagues in the shopping channel business could get a little bit carried away with making up stories. But stop me if you've heard any of these things in the past. Well, I heard there's only one mine left. Or it's a very rare stone, but the mines are running out. Or did you hear that the mines were flooded and they're not mining Tanzanite anymore? First of all of these things drive me crazy. Is it a rare gemstone? Absolutely it is. It's only found in one location on Earth, and that is in the Marilani Hills near the city of Arusha in Tanzania in Africa. But is it rare? Yes. Remember I say all gems have three traits: beauty, rarity, and durability. But how rare is it really? Well, I will tell you that for many, many years, it's in the top 3 or 4 or 5 gems bought every single year. So something's going to be in the top 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Yes, it's rare, but not quite perhaps as rare as you might think. They're still mining the gem, and they're still actively mining the gem. Okay, how about that one where the mine was flooded? Well, here's a little secret I'm going to give you. Don't tell anybody I told you this. Mines are basically holes in the ground. And Tanzanite's no exception. In fact, you'll see a shaft that goes down. You'll see people walking down the ladder. They have air in there that they pump in so that you don't, pass out. When it rains and you have a hole, water fills that hole, especially in the rainy season. When the hole is filled with water, they don't mine at that particular time. They wait till it dries out, and then they resume the mining. As far as are they closing the mines? Not as long as they're finding any Tanzanite in there. They're going to continue to do the mine. So don't fall prey to some of these crazy stories about, oh, this is rare. And take sometimes when you're listening to a shopping channel what the host is saying with a little bit of a grain of salt. Okay, so what is it about Tanzanite that we love so much? Well, I'll go back to one of the very earlier lessons on the 4 C's. Remember I talked about what is the most important thing about a colored gemstone? Well, it's the color. In fact, what are the 3 most important things about a colored gemstone? Color, color, and color. So if you keep that in mind, you're going to do just fine. But why the Tanzanite? What makes it so special? Well, number one, it is a beautiful blue, sometimes rivaling that blue that you see in that sapphire that you love so much. And blue is the most popular color on Earth, and every year sapphire is the #1 demanded color gemstone, sapphire. But there's something else about that Tanzanite that's very different too. It's what we call in the trade a pleochroic gemstone. I'll put the pleochroic spelling up there so you can see what it means. What it means is that piece of rough will show different colors depending upon how you orient it to the light. In fact, when you go to the mines, or when you see the mine evaluator that has the rough, he holds it up to a window where the sun's coming through, and if you hold it in one direction, it might look like it's brown. You hold it in another direction, it might look like it's purple, and then in the third direction, you might see a little bit more of that blue. Well, the blue is the most sought after color of all in the Tanzanite. In fact, they say that it can either be a bluish purple or a purplish blue. And I know that sounds like the same thing, but the second color that you speak of is the primary color. So if it's a purplish blue, it's going to be primarily a blue color where you see a little bit of purple in there. If they say it's a bluish purple, then you're going to see primarily a purple with maybe a little tinge of blue in there. Now what you need to know as the lapidary, which is someone who cuts colored gemstones, is that in order to orient it and cut it and get the maximum blue color out of that stone, you're going to sacrifice some of the weight. That's just the way that it works. So that's another reason why the blue, not only because it's in more demand, but it's harder to get blue color than it is to get that purple color when you're orienting that gem to cut it. So I hope that's easy for you to understand. Okay, so one last thing as we continue to enjoy some of the wildlife that I put in between some of these little pauses. One other thing that is important about Tanzanite, and I'll never forget it, and I told you that I visited the mine in 2001. I probably touched on this in another lesson, but I might actually be able to show you the sign this time. So it was 2001. It was around February of 2001. And the show that I did on QVC happened to be on Easter Sunday during 2001. While we were filming, unbeknownst to us, we happened upon an area. None of us had paid any attention to this sign. And on that sign, it said Camp Osama bin Laden. Now, in February, in April of 2001, probably very few of us really heard of who Osama bin Laden was. But when we got back, and we were going through, and we then, as you know, September 11th, 2001, coming up in the 20th year anniversary of that, when the World Trade Center was bombed, or not bombed, the planes were flown into it. All of a sudden, all of us knew the name of Osama bin Laden. And our producer of the segment, his name is Nick, and Nick Rosetto, and he was going through the footage, and he, looking more carefully, saw that sign that said Osama bin Laden. And so he identified this to his boss, who then identified it to the big brass at QVC, who then got the FBI and the CIA involved. And they said they may want to talk to you about what you know about happened there. Never really got that far, but then it really kind of drove home that part about how you need to know much more than just the chemical composition of a gemstone to be a good gemologist, because what you find out when something like that happens is that QVC made the decision we weren't going to sell any more Tanzanite because the organization of Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden were using the mines to enrich their terrorism. So all of a sudden we say we're not going to sell it. Others started to follow suit. HSN did a little bit later. Zales, some of the other places said they're not going to sell Tanzanite. The price crashes on Tanzanite. Now I can tell you from a human element, I know the people that we were working with in the mines there had nothing to do with any of that, and their livelihood gets taken away from them. So I felt very bad for them. Now obviously it's made a comeback, and so you can certainly buy Tanzanite without any fear anymore. But now the prices are right back where they were. But I just wanted you to know that correlation to knowing what's happening in the world and how it affects the price of your gemstones. Well, I know this was a different kind of lesson. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit that subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll have our next lesson. I know I'm not really caught up yet because I'm still traveling, and we're still have a new venture I'm going to talk about during the next lesson that I can talk to you about. But in the meantime, I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye, everybody.